Let's see. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We are expensing. Oh, there we are. Hi. This is Tracy. I'm here because Todd is not here. Todd and the great Hillary Anderson have won tickets on NPR. And Todd is really the tech genius, as you just saw. I'm doing the best I can. It's very 1985. I feel like Mark Singer with the VHS like thing in V. It's all good. Um, I am so excited to be here tonight. I am missing my partner in crime, the great Todd Anderson, but in his stead, we have two amazing gentlemen who are regulars on this program. I don't know why they slum with us, but I'm so grateful that they do. We have the great Brian Hayes, who, he covered me when I was over in Belfast making a little movie. And it was actually Mark who picked tonight's show, which is the 1971. I'm going to just say it. It's a classic. It's a classic. The Omega Man. Charlton Heston doing basically Richard Matheson's The Last Man on Earth. It's I Am Legend. Vincent Price had already done this before, but this is the treatment. Let's be fair, and Justin is going to correct this when I bring him on. Vincent Price's Last Man on Earth, Charlton Heston's, Omega Man, neither one are really faithful to the book, but that's okay. Richard Matheson said, yeah, I'm good with the changes. They don't resemble my book, so it's fine. But he was all for it. I'm sure the checks cashed and it was all good. And then, of course, for some of us later, Will Smith made a film called I Am Legend, and I'll leave that up to you to decide how you feel. But for me, as much as I love the first two gents who played this role as the last man on Earth, it is all about Charlton Heston. I think he is a movie star of the first order. I think his work in the golden age of Hollywood should speak for itself. This is my favorite shitty movie. We dare to curse. We're not going to be politically correct. I don't care what your feelings are about guns. I probably agree with you. We don't like what a certain Roger Moore did to an older Charlton Heston. So we're going to leave that aside. We are here tonight to pay homage and to celebrate the joy that is the Omega Man. This film came out through Warner Brothers. I can't state it enough. A major Hollywood studio produced this film with Charlton Heston. It's a very important film in that it's sci-fi. It's part of almost a weird chapter, I feel, of Charlton Heston's film career, where we have Planet of the Apes, we have The Great Soylent Green, and we have Omega Man. And to me, in my mind, that dystopian sci-fi interesting future that Heston leaps into. I love all the films. I love his performance in all these films. I think it's something that post-COVID, if you've never seen Omega Man, perhaps will play different for you. His character is, 3 years in lockup. That might sound familiar. There might have been a plague that turned people into zombies. Some of us might say MAGA. You do you. So when you have brain dead dummies following somebody who makes no sense and who is an empty messianic figure who wants to be a dictator, I'm not saying that relates to anybody, because we're here to talk about someone who has a really white face, not orange, in case that's what you were thinking. Not saying that. This film might play differently in 2024 than it did in 1971. But here's the thing about great films, which is why we are here to celebrate. I want to clear the air. Mark and Justin, Justin Humphreys, the great historian who is here, who has the best Charlton Heston imitation I've heard, and you will hear it later tonight. We all love this film. This is another one of those episodes where we're like, yeah, we're my favorite shitty movie. None of us think this is shitty. All of us understand the flaws. All of us embrace them. And in fact, the flaws with diamonds and perhaps relationships in your life make things worth living. This film is fun. This is a film that was shot, again, it came out in 71. Back in the day, I live in downtown LA, as longtime viewers might know. Saturday and Sundays, it would run up. So a lot of the footage in downtown LA of 1970, when they shot a lot of this footage, you could just shoot because no one was here. And so that's how they achieved this look. In 1984, Year of the Comet did much the same thing to achieve those exteriors that we're going to talk about. But a big thing I want to lean into, and Justin will help us with this and put it in an historic frame as it should be. There was the Warner Brothers Ranch, which we have lost because a certain NBA person is now running Warner Brothers, so they destroyed it. And so Neville's apartment is gone. A lot of the great infrastructure that was used for sets of many things are now gone. So when you watch Omega Man in 1971, you get to see a glimpse of old Hollywood, not only with Charlton Heston, but with locations that no longer exist. Downtown, thank God, still exists. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think this is a film that also needs to be positioned as this is 1971. So when audiences were watching this, we're in an era of post Charles Manson. So when cult figures say things like The Family, in 1971, The Family might be heard differently. People might think differently about this film, but I think because it's classic, it still works. So we're going to try to contextualize, celebrate, and bring that up. I want to also, before we get into the program, because, privilege of Todd's not here, so I get to prattle on a little bit more. In case you guys, and I know I've pimped this on the show before, and if you haven't bought it, I'm just saying Christmas is coming up. One of our guests tonight, again, the great Justin Humphreys, film historian of our time, he wrote the definitive book on George Pal. That means he's the father of sci-fi cinema for you and I. Guys, years in the making. He is now touring the globe, going to George Pal's hometown overseas, because he's the guy who knows everything. This is the definitive scholarly work. If you don't own it, you need to correct that. Go to Amazon, just make that stuff happen. Justin also has contributed mightily to Taschen's, there's no other way to say it, just absolutely gorgeous Hollywood book. He's helped with a lot of details on the photographs, and he's written some beautiful things. Just buy it for your Christmas gift for all your friends that you love and care about. So anyway, I just wanted to do that shout out. I also, because Todd can't be here because, Hillary once again is a winner and they're going to a concert. Mark came in and is like, I'm here for this. And Mark actually picked the movie. And when I knew that Mark picked, Omega Man, I was like, I know Justin loves this movie. So that's how this unlikely trio is happening tonight. If you guys are not watching or listening, rather, to Hindsight, anywhere you find your podcasts, Mark has done something kind of remarkable on a technical level in terms of what podcasts can sound like. He has really created an amazing story. And then on the creative level, he's also one-upped it and created an amazing story. So go to wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, blah, blah, blah. And Hindsight, Houdini, you won't think of him the same way again. It's a masterful piece of producerial, I think, prowess. And if we're lucky, this might be a way for creators and artists to tell important stories that perhaps the masters of industry who destroy Neville's houses and run studios for the moment don't understand. This is how you tell good stories. And we're going to find the good stories where we can. And I think that's probably in the podcast. Mark has done that. Hindsight, I'm going to bring up right now. Tonight, he's playing the role of 160 Proof. So I'm just going to bring him up. Oh my God, Mark, I love the Anglo-Saxon. It's so good to see you.
How it's like the title as well as this shirt, which I've seen. This is what gets. This is the advertised on my social media feed.
Oh my God, I love it.
So I felt I needed to wear this tonight. My girlfriend suggested that I get it.
By the way, I think of you as a stud muffin. So I own it, do the thing. Your girlfriend clearly has great taste. I'm here to, not that she needs to cut line, but that situation. Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and I have to thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and the discussion about and the words about Hindsight the day before, which is our debut show.
Yeah,
posters right here in case anybody wants to see it. And this is the search for Spock, and I'll just have to tell you as well.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! They find him.
This is in the context of my favorite shitty movie. This place, okay. All these toys are for a company I used to work for. So I am also a nerd, but my explanation is that I worked for this company. Wow. 2-minute warning. All right. So this is the Coliseum at USC, which is very dangerous, according to this movie.
Oh wow.
And of course, the wonderful Cassandra Crossing, which I have to thank the great Stephen Parros for introducing me to this movie, which
Yes.
is, probably one of the last of the big disaster movies, I guess, or at least one of the last ones that I was
Yes.
aware of. In this case, it's on a train, which was, I think, the last mode of transportation available at that point, So
Absolutely.
aside from elevators in the Towering Inferno and cruise ships in the Poseidon Adventure and Los Angeles itself in Earthquake.
Yeah.
So,
Back when we made interesting disaster movies, not like in the 90s, we're like, what would be a great follow-up to Speed, where the bus has to stay at 50 miles an hour? Let's do the Love Boat. What goes
there was
the Love Boat? Speed 2 is the Love Boat. It doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen.
There was a fellow that I worked with many years ago, and we were just at lunch having this discussion about disaster movies. It's got to be 25, 30 years ago now. And he brings up the discussion about how he always wanted to do the last great big cast, all-star cast disaster movie. And it was about the first voyage, the first trip of a transatlantic train from New York to Paris. And this transatlantic train, of course, the movie, of course, everything would happen that you would expect to happen. He hadn't seen Cassandra Crossing. I hadn't seen Cassandra Crossing because, if we pitched this movie, they'd been like, "Oh, we've done that." And but if you put Timothy Chalamet in it, we'll do it again.
Can I just add? I think it's cute that you think anyone you would pitch that could greenlight would know what the Cassandra Crossing is. Not to be cynical, but I feel like one of my favorite pitches. I think I've shared this with you before, Mark, but for the viewers at home, once upon a time, 20 years ago, I was a very young executive. I went into Paramount. We were pitching a love story against a war-torn background, and my writer pitch the details of his very beautifully written out pitch. And he does the thing. And the great pitch, the young executive, who was actually 20 years older than me, but things change, says, "That's an amazing pitch. What's the tone of what you just pitched?" As if hearing the story wasn't obvious. And his answer, "Oh, the love story against a war-torn thing. This is the poster behind me. We call this The Year Living Dangerously." Yeah. He said, "Oh, The Year Living Dangerously." Without missing a beat, the executive says, "What year is that?" And so I was not going to sell that pitch in the room. It's an obscure filmmaker called Peter Weir with an obscure Mel Gibson, an obscure Sigourney Weaver. Oh, and Linda Hunt won the Oscar in '82 for supporting actors playing Billy Kwan, but it's all good. So that was a learn for me. Don't assume anyone knows anything. So Cassandra Crossing, you're probably good, dude. Like, Gen Z is like, so it's all amazing.
Well, this was before this, this whole idea was discussed before both George Kennedy and Ricardo Montalban had passed, because George Kennedy, of course, had to play the engineer of this train.
Petroni.
Absolutely. We would not call him Petroni, but everybody would know he's Petroni.
It should ride Petroni.
And of course, Ricardo Montalban has to be the president of France. I mean, that's just the way.
Obviously, I spit on thee. I did you just give him some Kirkit.
The way it would work. But I want to pitch my version of The Year of Living Dangerously, which generally speaking is any day you try to park at a Trader Joe's. I mean, that's the hour of living dangerously is like trying to get a parking space.
Hour of living dangerously. Yeah,
with all these people that they're starting to beat the shit out of each other with their yoga mats because they can't get a parking space.
Yeah, it's so not a namaste forward situation.
True story here. Trader Joe's started carrying booze because people were getting too carried away in the parking lot.
Really? Oh, that's amazing.
That's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay.
But as far as Omega Man goes, it was one of my favorite movies before the pandemic, and as we were discussing before the show, as soon as the lockdown occurred, it's like, I'm like ordering it up and get it. It's like I already had it on Blu-ray, but it's like, you know what? I will buy this movie in multiple forms because I want to be able to access it without getting up out of my chair.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And I mean, I've been a Heston fan forever, and this guy, he would do every movie that came along. Like, I mean, he he was like, okay, if I'm not going to be typecast. I'm not going to, he's like Taylor in Planet of the Apes. He's the police detective in Soylent Green, Thor, the detective Thor.
Yeah.
Which if there's any other producers listening, Tracy, you're a producer, so you're listening. I actually have what would be my idea. One of the things that I always wanted to do, and I never was able to put this together, I was going to do it in comic book form, but I would love to do it in some other form, is take some of these classic movies. And, I think the antidote to the reboots is if you look at the story and figure out where it would logically go afterward.
Yeah.
So for me, if I was going to do a Soylent Green TV series, it would be the child of Thorne and the furniture girl, Cheryl. And, it's 20 some years later. The corporation has covered it up. I mean, the way he gets carried out of the church, nobody's listening to him. There are 22 million crazy people in New York City in 2022 in that movie.
I like this take very much. I don't want to go on too much further because I think Justin probably will have some thoughts about that, because one of the things I love about Justin, so many things. Like, again, I know we've pimped his stuff on the show before, guys. I'm just saying, you need to buy his work. Okay, Dr. Phibes, amazing. He does the Blu-ray commentary. He does commentaries on a bunch of things that are amazing.
Dr. Phibes, it's the George Powell book, it's the commentaries, it's this new gigantic, it comes with its own cart to get it to your car.
It's true. You need a cart to do the thing. And I mean, whatever. He's humble, so I get to do the bragging before I pull him up. But I say this as somebody who grew up, reading James Card, reading Kevin Brownlow, caring about Janine Basinger. Like, I love my film historians. And Justin, well, everyone's younger than I am. He's a little younger than I am. But he really is the heir apparent to being, I think, the shepherd of film history. He had one of the great mothers, still does, who allowed him access to great films, absolutely supported his dreams, took him to concerts, took him to, cons, took him to movies. Really, he got to meet a lot of people who are no longer with us at a very early age. And I think his access, because of this great mother and his own passion and love of cinema, you will see he's been on the show before. He's a fan favorite. He's really special. And I just want to give a shout out, because I think sometimes people don't appreciate Gen X. They don't appreciate whatever. Justin is the fire holder for moving forward. And he was friends with Peter Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich gave him almost an heir apparent, come on, Justin, help me as I pass on. So without further ado, Mark and I love Justin. I want to bring him up. He's super special. Please buy his books, people. Christmas. He also really freaking loves this movie, and it's going to be a love fest for Omega Man. I want to welcome back to the program Speedy Bob, but to us, he's just Justin Humphries. Justin, welcome back, sir.
But you're damned, Tracy. Don't you see that? Don't you see? No, my love. Thank you so much for the kind words. My love for this movie literally goes back to 5th grade. My mom, God bless her, she loves science fiction, and there was a local comic shop we went to, and one day she just casually bought the old movie edition. I think it's Berkeley Medallion movie edition paperback of the Omega Man of I Am Legend with that beautiful Mort Kunstler artwork, which while I was researching this, I discovered still exists. Thank God. I've loved that painting. But so I just started reading it out of curiosity. And Matheson, along with Edgar Allan Poe, became one of the first adult level writers that I ever read as a kid. Wow. And so I read Matheson's short stories and was just and every short story of the last 50 years seems anticlimactic after Matheson. But anyway, so I actually did. We did a book reports in 5th grade where you dress up like a character. And I did I Am Legend, and I dressed up like Anthony Zerbe even though that's not what they look like at all in the book. We had the monk robe, and I put on the sunglasses. I didn't do the makeup, but I did the Zerby thing. But no, this, you know, like you were saying, I Am Legend is an absolute masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece. And I spent an afternoon at Matheson's house, and I interviewed him. It was one of the happiest days of my life. It was like going to meet Jesus. Yeah. I'll never get to meet Lovecraft. I'll never get to meet Poe, but I spent an afternoon at Matheson's, and he was great. But I got to talking to him about the different versions of I Am Legend. He said, he had basically said, he said essentially almost verbatim what you did, Tracy, that that the Omega Man is so far removed from I Am Legend, it's almost like it's its own thing.
Right.
And he said they're never going to do it right. They're never going to do I Am Legend right. I
want to draw your eyes to Jeff Luce, our favorite fan. I think the best way to tell this novel story is long form, and that's why I think the TV series The Last Man on Earth is the best take on I Am Legend.
I think it's the most faithful. It's the most faithful, easily. But have you ever read? I'll respond to Jeff's comment by saying, have you read Night Creatures, the original Matheson script? No. That became Last Man on Earth. It was rewritten as Last Man on Earth. It was called Night Creatures. It was for Hammer, and amazingly, it was for Hammer, and the British censors considered it too violent, and they dropped it. And it's been published. And it's really good. But it was closer to the original. They're not like shuffling zombies like in Last Man on Earth. The zombies, the creatures, the vampires in Night Creatures are much closer to what's in the book, and they're terrifying in the book. I mean, they're like scary, raggedy monsters.
Before we get into the granular, let's just
sure.
Lines. I want to bring Mark into this conversation too, because I think, Justin, you just put your thumb on something. Before we get into the movie,
sure.
Like Matheson for the age. Some of us are Somewhere in Time's kids forever.
Yeah.
Or Good Time Return. But what's interesting is that we go from vampires in the first iteration from Hollywood, in a way, to, I would argue, I Am Legend, or not I Am Legend, but Omega Man is very much more zombie-like, in it's. I don't think of them as vampires. So I feel
mutants. I always said people so often say mutants. They're kind of more mutants. They're too smart to be zombies and too fast, but they're not human.
But they're kind of like, I think in 1971, post Romero, who I want to give. I mean, we did zombie films before, but Night of the Living Dead is really where it started in a significant way. But there's something about this that mutants, zombies, they can think, but like the change from vampire to the mutant sort of semi-zombies. Talk to us if you know any. What is that? And Mark, what do you?
Well, they had I can tell you, Corrington. I think it was one of the Corringtons had a background in I think biology.
Tell us who they are.
I can't. So the screenwriters of Omega Man are John William and Joyce Hooper Corrington. They also wrote, among other things, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, von Richthofen and Brown, and some novels. They lived in, I think he's passed now, and I think she's still around, but they lived in Louisiana. But she had I think it was one of them had a background in like biochemical engineering or something. So this was not, totally removed from what they'd done. The movie was called the Omega Man was called I Am Legend, literally up to the point where they were sending out stills for the movie. You'll occasionally see a still of Heston, and on the back there'll be a squib, and it says Charlton Heston stars in I Am Legend. And for a while I actually had an original copy of the script, and it was I Am Legend. And actually, it makes more sense in terms of the story if they called it I Am Legend, because it's about, there's all these references to like where the little girl goes, "Are you God?" And they're going to come in the night and tear Richie's soul all up. They're creating their new set of myths and legends based on their own experience. But interestingly, William Peter Blatty did rewrites on the script. Yeah, this is around the time.
That's cool.
He did uncredited work on it.
I'll tell you something, Tracy, too, that struck me as that transition from vampires to mutants that we were talking about. It's something that you alluded to in the introduction, which is this is 1971. You know, it's we're moving from kind of the, you know, through that era of the 60s, and there's a wonderful documentary from Frank Marshall called Laurel Canyon about the music scene in LA in the 60s and 70s. And that speaks very directly to this feeling of a lack of security as Manson and his family were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I feel like this film, by turning them into mutants, it's like, you know, clearly Rosalind Cash's character and her brother Richie were able to escape them. So there's a definite cult influence. Like Matthias, Anthony Zerbe's character Matthias, is a cult leader in addition to being a mutant. You know, so it's kind of very interesting. It's something that, you know, when I first saw it many decades.
Well, by the way, Tracy, I'm gonna add to what you said earlier. You were describing Matthias, and in comparison to a certain other person, and I would add in, I would add in one detail. He's a TV personality. Who are people going to follow? A TV personality, blindly following, just as they did in life. It's like they're carrying it over. You know,
and this was decades before.
Yeah.
Who was the guy on Fox News for the longest time? That guy.
Bill O'Reilly.
He's very much his character. When you see the flashback sequences prior to the plague, he strikes me very much as a Bill O'Reilly type commentator.
Right. And I was struck by a lot of things because, you know, this film comes out in 71. It's basically shot in 70. It's a different world. I would argue in the early 70s, we had wars that perhaps we didn't agree with. Inflation was bad. Oil and gas prices are real. Hi, Pliskin sneezing, and he's done. Pliskin is over. But we had the beginning of like Richard Donner, you know, in 77, 78 would give us Superman. We had superheroes. We had corrupt, let's just call it a spade, Republican politicians who left early. We had a lot of thematics that are perhaps parallel with perhaps where we are now. But I was struck by Warner Brothers made this film, and they used the word the family, which this would have been a country watching this on first release, very, let's just say close to the Manson situation. Ironically, Paramount, a year after 71, would release The Godfather, where the family was a phrase used in The Godfather because the mob was like, we don't want to be called the mob. We need to be the family. And so we had Coppola doing that. So I would argue that Warner Brothers in 71 was the family, was like Jonestown meets like MAGA ahead of time. And then in 72, Paramount's make it the family, which is obviously the Italian mob. And so the family in 71 and 72, hi, Plisker, those things are like, I know, those things are very different than our world. But I would say the ethos of where we are living in now, i.e. last year and a half ago, Paramount Plus did Al Ruddy's version of The Making of the Godfather. And
the author, yeah.
Family.
Which was about 80% fiction, I might add.
Well, it's Al Ruddy, R.I.P. That's what he wanted to do. But my point is that we have the family in Warner Brothers. We have the family used as a let's just say a story device in The Godfather, a year apart in terms of release. We're in an America when this film comes out, and I want to, before we get into the granular, because like I got you two gents here who know more than I do about all of these things. I think it's interesting that, and I think we should give proper credit, because I think certain Gen Xers and certainly young people, if they know who Charlton Heston is, they have thoughts that may or may not be anchored to reality or context. I mean, Heston was marching with Martin Luther King. Heston was progressive. Yes, he liked his guns, and that's a different situation, and that's all cool. We can all have our own policies. But I want to suggest, before we get into the granular of this film we're here to talk about tonight, that in 1971, to have Warner Brothers release a film with the guy who played Moses, perhaps doing some crucifixion metaphors later, the fact that he is looking at, that he is touching, that he is kissing, that he clearly had sex with, the hot Rosalind Cash, like she prefigures Pam Grier in exploitation films. Rosalind's doing it on a Warner Brothers studio budget. She's a badass. She's gorgeous. They connect. And it's a very important movie in terms of what we were saying. This is a love story. Yes, he's the last man on earth, but I don't care where you are on the Kinsey spectrum, Rosalind Cash is probably the answer. And that's progressive, and we shouldn't take it for granted because it came out in 71. A black woman making out with Moses, hardcore. And Rosalind Cash said, I read an interview where she was a little skittish, and Heston, who was much older than she was, said, what's going on, young lady? And she's like, I grew up with you playing these historic figures. And he's like, he calmed her down. He was like, I'm so happy to be here with you. And I just want to give a shout out to, that's really freaking progressive. And we don't see that a lot. And Justin shared with me, anyone who's listening, do yourself a favor. Justin Googled and found this YouTube thing, Whoopi Goldberg interviewing Heston 20, 25 years ago.
It was like 92. I saw it first run when I was a kid.
So Justin, talk to us about that.
Okay, so it was the scene in the Omega. It was the first interracial love scene in a major studio movie. Not like holding hands or kissing, like full on. They're doing the nasty. Yeah. And there had been 100 Rifles, but it was an independent movie that got picked up by a major. So that's different. But the other thing I'll say about this, she's a complete badass in the movie, and Heston never gets the drop on her. The only thing she's got the drop on him. That whole first scene, she has him totally in check. And like, this is 53 years ago. Anybody who says Charlton Heston was a racist is completely full of shit.
This is how we introduce Rosalind Cash, pretending to be like in this mode because she's been living just like he is. He doesn't know there's anyone alive. And the way she plays this scene is so gorgeous.
And for any of the younger people watching, department stores actually did look like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people used to wear vertical stripes too. Yes. But the thing was, the thing with Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg's a big Charlton Heston fan. She wrote a beautiful little piece about him for Roddy McDowell's Double Exposure book. And she differed from him politically, of course, and was very open to it, but she loved him as a person and loved his movies.
Yeah.
But so he was on her show, and she is fanning out so hard. She is like a giggly little kid. She loves it. They're having such a great time. And she talks to him, and she says, she goes, like that interracial kiss, like, do you think there would be problems with that today? And he goes, she's like, I hope not. He goes, I hope we're past that. And he goes, here, let's extend the franchise. And he leans over and he kisses her, and she's like, she's like a little girl. And he's laughing, and it's like, it is the sweetest thing. But of course, now it would probably get called sexual harassment. So
I know, but I just want to build on what Justin is saying, because it's like, whatever, the token white chick on the show this evening. What's amazing about this is that what came before the love with the Heston moment where he kisses her, she literally was as a black woman in America of a certain age, when she saw this film and she saw Rosalind, getting to have this moment, she was internalizing, I'm being represented. She's a badass. She's sexy as fuck. She's got a gun. She knows how to handle herself. Like, she is a fully realized woman. And one of the things that I saw, and I watched it again during the pandemic as well, and it hit me because a certain orange felon convicted rapist. I mean, I'm not naming anyone specifically. Obviously, but one
You're
of
as
the
subtle as the catapult that they're aiming at
I'm
Neville.
I'm super subtle. I don't know who I'm talking about.
That's okay. It's okay.
But-
I'm on your side, so it's good.
But I know, and that's why I love you, gents. But here's the thing that I thought was really, and again, I want to encourage people who haven't seen this film to watch it, because I understand that I have this conversation. I've had it with two of my female friends who hate Charlton Heston because they think they understand his gun thing. I'm like, you got to get beyond that, and you got to look at the man. You got to, not here to argue that, because that's not why we're here tonight. But what I will say is that Charlton Heston put his star power into this film in 1971, and I'm not going to get political. I'm just going to say in 22 states and counting, if we don't elect somebody who's not an orange rapist felon, women are no longer in control of their bodies, which means we're second-class citizens, which is bizarre because Roe versus Wade is over 50 years old, stare decisis. If you're really a conservative, that's what you gave your testimony to get on Supreme Court. All I'm saying to you folks is that the birth control pill was barely a thing in the 60s. In 1971, Moses himself is having sex with this super hot woman who happens to be African American. And here's what's in the background. Planned Parenthood supplies, where she picks up birth control after they've done the nasty.
You're talking about oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, like, that's really freaking progressive. So I don't want to hear your 2024 hot takes.
Well,
This
and
Saturday,
Well, I think I
figured out, just
Yeah.
to wrap this up before I go to you, gents.
Yeah.
We go from Rosalind picking up birth control with Planned Parenthood supplies behind her to the
to Chuck laughing. Yeah.
Heston's reaction, the Cheshire Cat thing. This is a man who is like, this is a good thing, super progressive. I go over to you.
Well, I'll add this. This is something, I mean, aside from his obvious virtues, like marching with Martin Luther King, when most people in Hollywood were scared shitless to do it. They were afraid it would hurt their careers. And I advise everyone watching this to look up the video of Heston, Sidney Poitier, James Baldwin, Harry Belafonte, and Marlon Brando on TV.
Yes.
With Heston in 1963, very eloquently describing why America should be integrated and how blacks have been treated like second-class citizens. Also, in Soylent Green, Fleischer and Heston and everybody, they cast it deliberately colorblind. So Heston's superior officer is Brock Peters. He's black, and nothing is made of it. Nothing's made of it. And Chuck Connor's his concubine girl, his furniture girl in it, Paula Kelly, she's black. Nothing's made of it. But the fact his superior officer is black. I was at a screening a few years ago for a film by a current director whose work I am pretty contemptuous of, that I will not name. And he got very, very pompous and said, "Oh, well, I've got a black leader leading this, this operation," and the whole audience applauded. And I was like, Richard Fleischer and Chuck Heston beat you to this probably before you were born, But also think of it this way: not only is Lisa is Roz Cash's character all of those things, she also has managed with Paul Koslow's Dutch to be a kind of den mother to a group of kids for 3 years. Like, she has managed to keep them alive and survive. By the way, the place they live in the movie, before I forget, it's up on Briar Summit, which is way up in the hills over Hollywood. It's way over Hollywood. And it has this absolutely almost like it's like a gigantic view of LA, like from past downtown all the way to practically the coast.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I think what happened was they chose that location, and then they realized, oh shit, we can see planes and cars and everything else. So we can't show you the view, which is the big thing. But anyway, but Roz Cash was great. She's good in everything she did.
Well,
she's wonderful.
As far as her character in that movie, it's interesting because we were talking about art and film being kind of a window into when they were made. And if you think about the agency that her character had, in the film, it's established that this film takes place in 1978, I believe, because it's 3 years. And
75. I think it's 70. Is it 75? I don't remember.
Well,
the
calendar said 75, and if we assume it was 3
so
years.
it's 78. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
77, 78, something like that. Is that, but when this film was made in 70, 71, it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think a married woman could get a bank account on her own, couldn't get a credit card on her own, couldn't get a loan. No. And it's like you have this powerful woman of color character in this movie, and it took an apocalypse to make it that way, Right. And so, but she just does such a wonderful job with this movie. It's like, she's captivating, as you watch this film.
Well, I'll tell you,
I do want to spend a little bit of time on this because, again, I don't agree with Charlton Heston politically, probably on maybe anything, but like in his later years. But I appreciate what he's done, and I think he's a movie star of the first caliber. But he made an active choice to, and I know he was older, but like he chose Planet of the Apes, he chose Soylent Green, he chose Omega Man. He was leaning into, because again, I think you have to view this film for all the warts and the not, in the context in which it was made. So Matheson had written this novel that was older by the time, but the reinterpretation in the 70s, of course, is what Vincent Price does as The Last Man on Earth. If you're really interested in film, if you're really interested in adaptation of novels, look at the Vincent Price, look at what Heston does, and then if you want, the Will Smith version, because that's interesting. Because I would argue that each film obviously was made in the time it was made, but the ones that I think are most worth rewatching, I'll phrase it that way, perhaps were the two older films. And they were made at a totemic period of time where we didn't know what we were turning into. And that Heston, again, Moses himself said, I'm putting my white whateverness onto this, and that he had this black co-star. We don't get to just say this is nothing. And people who want to have their feelings, this is a really progressive thing for brothers. And I just want to say, people who are older than we are or younger than we are who want to have things, strip the politics away. Look at what this film did in 71 from a major studio, and let's look at it at the context. It's a progenitor to what would come later. And let's give
collectively, I would add that all three of those movies, Planet of the Apes, Soylent Green, and the Omega Man, are all very anti-establishment films. They are,
and they're about things that we are still very much concerned about now: nuclear war, the apocalypse, the end of the world, a plague, a pandemic. Funny thing about that. And in the case of Soylent Green, in the first 5 minutes, Edward G. Robinson is talking about the greenhouse effect, global warming, the first 5 minutes. And people wrote, what pisses me off so badly about Soylent Green, and I love that movie. It's one of my favorite films. People shit on that movie. I mean, shit on it for years. Yeah. Those asshole Medved brothers put it in the Golden Turkey Awards alongside stuff like The Creeping Terror. I had one writer friend call it a stuffed turkey. It's like, who in the fuck? Like that movie's fantastic on so many levels. But the world building in it's fantastic. But with Omega Man, I think when we, like, in terms of the flaws of it, and we'll talk more about this later. I think the real weak link, the weakest link in this creative team is Boris Sagal, the director. Mm-hmm. I think he's visually, like, there's parts of it that work really well, but a lot of it is like the beats are wrong, and it's like he doesn't I want to build on what you're saying, Justin, because it's funny. Because I mean, look, I'm my age, and when I went to film school in San Francisco, in the late '90s, I remember one of the rules of turning things in was do not use a Zoom. If you watch, and by the way, Mike Nichols in The Graduate says "fuck you, hold my beer" because he makes those work.
to Justin's point, this director does not necessarily Mike Nichols that situation in this. But so there's the zooms that are clunky and the whatever. A lot of it is like trying to hide people in downtown because they didn't have permits.
Yeah.
And it was 70s. But there's clunky filmmaking. But I think when you have a star of the first order like Charlton Heston, when you have Rosalind Cash, who, I'm sorry, you can't take your eyes off her. And I can't say it enough. Pam Grier is about to rock your world in B movies. Rosalind's doing this in 71 in a Warner Brothers film because Heston said yes. Points.
Well, and she was a trained theatrical actress. She had plenty of experience with it. She was an established theatrical actress.
She to me sells him in such a way that I feel like, I mean, this shot, like, just look at the film still. The way she looks at him, he is, some of us who might be gals might say too old or whatever. And God bless Charlton Heston, who feels he needs to be topless for this film at a certain age. I kind of like that because I really like men with real bodies, but I might be alone in that. But like today, everyone's supposed to be like Zac Efron in their 80s or whatever. But like there's something about the way she is able to look at him like she's of new Hollywood, he is of classic Hollywood, even in 71. So you have a merging of this as America in 71 is going through all the turmoil that I think, Justin, you pointed out so brilliantly. I think this film, and again, I'm not pumping it. We all know the flaws and we can do that. I just really, it's funny because I had a few friends that are like, oh, you're doing Omega Man. I was like, you bet you are. Because this show, it's our show, so we get to talk about what we love. I think I want to say, and if Todd were here, I think he would back me up. I don't want to speak for him. The reason we do this show is that we maybe called My Favorite Shitty Movie, but we want to lift up films that you haven't seen or maybe you haven't checked out in a while. This is a really great film, and it's an important film because it's a Warner Brothers film. There's the racial stuff, there's the progressive things, but it's actually a good movie. And I think Justin is absolutely right. This is not the best directing you've ever seen, but the story, the structure, the intent, and the actors survive. I love the soundtrack. It's terrible.
And I was going to say the sound. What?
I love the soundtrack, but like it's very A-Team, but it works for me. I
disagree. I totally disagree about the soundtrack. I totally disagree. The soundtrack, that soundtrack is magnificent. I mean, it's.
I love it. I just think it's a little.
I don't know. I love. No. It's like, it's just intense. It's just an intense soundtrack. It's like, it doesn't. It's not low key, and it's not a low key story, but it adds this emotional dimension to that story that on so many levels. It's such a creative soundtrack. Like that noise you hear, that boom, that weird echoey noise. That's it's water chimes. Ron Grainer used water chimes to create, which is the sound of like the echoing through the nothingness of Los Angeles. It just operates on this almost subliminal level. No, I love that. I've always found that soundtrack totally gripping. It's
gripping, but it's very of its time, and I like that.
It's good, because soundtracks suck now by and large. I mean, it's a great soundtrack.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I think it's perfect for the movie. But it in a weird way, it dates the movie, even though I like that it's like an amber for that film. The way I think, but there's a version, I would argue, one of my favorite movies, as you both know, is, the great, I would argue, Alien. Jerry Goldsmith's score for Alien works in 79. It works now. It will work 100 years from now. It's not of 79. The score in Omega Man is awesome and perfect for the film. I agree with you, Justin. But it is of a time, and for younger audiences who may not be like as whatever as we want to, they may say, "Oh my God!" But I love it. Mark, what do you think about the music? I mean, because you've done so much. I'm just going to do this again. Mark's hindsight. He has revolutionized. Like basically, when you listen to podcasts, the sound that he's done, like he's an expert in sound. So I want to bring Mark into what he did with Hindsight. And I want you to, vis-a-vis what you achieved with Hindsight, how do you listen to this score hearing it now? What do you
I'll say
think?
technically as a producer, I hired the expertise. I brought in it's a wonderful, wonderful creative fellow named Ted Bonnet. His company's called Radio Pictures. And it really, he's a guy who has had a career in audio for 30 years, and he experiments with sound frequency and the neurological, physiological effects of sound frequency. So when he says something will be spine tingling, it really will be.
Ooh,
And so,
okay.
that's kind of what we worked into it. And even the mix, as good as it is that you're hearing we mastered the podcast using Dolby Atmos. So if you can listen to it, either the direct mix on.
Mark, I'm going to
Yes.
interrupt you
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I want everyone listening to this. Did you hear the part where Mark told you he produced a podcast in Dolby Atmos? Because no one else is doing that. So I'm going to do the thing because he's too.
Thank you.
Like, guys, Hindsight, what are you doing? Listen.
Yes.
Sorry.
Hindsight the day before on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and my YouTube channel, Mark Haynes Productions. For this film, I have to tell you, it's like many things led me to this film in terms of the Corringtons as the screenwriters, because I feel like I came to this film late. The Corringtons, because I was a Planet of the Apes fan. I was a huge fan of The Prisoner, which Ron Grenier did the music for. And I'll say something about Ron Grenier that I actually think he's comparable to Jerry Goldsmith in how often he reinvents himself. I love James Horner music, but James Horner borrows from himself a lot.
Yeah.
To the extent that we get riffs from Star Trek II,
Wrath of Khan, Alien,
and stuff like that. So in this film, it's funny because I do have to agree with Justin, where I think Boris Sagal's direction and is really, it's like you have this amazing cast, this kind of really amazing story, and you turn it over to a movie of the week level director who
let me add one detail. And it was shot by Russ Meddy, who had shot Touch of Evil. It wasn't like he had an amateur DP. So
so it had to be Boris who was like bringing down the average, So
I want to talk about that because I think Touch of Evil, God, I feel like, oh my God, are we so old? Like, we're too young to know Touch of Evil, but yeah, we know Touch of Evil.
Well, I will say that the sound and music of this movie, I really love it because they do some really great stuff, especially when Heston, long before the term post-traumatic stress became a thing, his character is clearly experiencing that in a number of the beginning flashback scenes where he presses the elevator button and it's an explosion sound effect is put with it. And it's like, this guy's going through some shit.
We're still in Vietnam. We're still, like this.
Well, you were talking about the cultural aspects of it. I would say that the family is also, they're like a bunch of Maoists. This is year one. Let's destroy all of history. Isn't that a great idea? Let's burn history. Let's burn books. Let's destroy the statues. Let's do this. We can't have history. We're going to start all over again, and everything's going to be wonderful because we're a bunch of complete fucking lunatics,
That's
a wonderful touch.
Some of us are the far right and the far left because they meet. That's a hypothetical but what I want to do is I want to quickly, in case people haven't seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, this podcast right now with one of our best historians and Mark, who, can I say Hindsight enough? I don't know what your
problem. You do. I appreciate that.
Hindsight.
My favorite shitty movie, sponsored this week by Hindsight the day before. Now streaming.
But let's read the kids in at home because again, it's 71. Some of us had older parents and they read us into this good thing. We start on, and I love the letters of this is actually, it's like the Godfather font that we don't talk about anymore.
It really is,
Heston is driving through downtown Los Angeles in this pimped out car with an 8-track that I'm jealous that I do not own. And they're very clear that he's driving. He's the last man on earth. We do lots of wide shots. to talk about the isolation. One of my favorite things is like, we don't know where we are. We got Charlton Heston, who is Moses to you and me, driving in this like pimped out car, whatever. He pulls over to Woodstock. Now, again, 1971, we've got Orange Julius burgers. By the way, because I live downtown, Orange Julius started in downtown LA. So I like that they.
What theater is that, Tracy?
This is actually, I think they propped this up. This is, I feel like
No, it was a real theater, and that marquee was there. I visited that marquee. It's been changed, but for years.
Isn't it the
Huh?
Palace?
When he gets out of that car,
It was on 8th Street. Is that right? It was on 8th Street off of Broadway, and I remember I've got photos of me with it about 12 years ago.
he's just near the next shot of that, when he gets out of the car and he's looking up at the. Well, I don't know if he's even out of the car, but he's looking up at the marquee there. When they cut to the angle through the windshield, you can see the Tower Theater behind him at the intersection. So it's like,
well, also, and I'm gonna. There's a brilliant thought. There's a brilliant piece of thought that went into choosing Woodstock. If you are the last man on Earth, you haven't seen a healthy human being in years. What movie do you watch? A movie with a giant gathering of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of happy people. That's nonfiction. And the thing is, like, that they don't have him say, I love this film with all of these people because I'm so lonely. They just do it. It's a great little touch.
But there's an ironic thing that I think as film nerds, us three could probably agree to. Things that I appreciated about this film, growing up watching it, coming back to it today, is that Heston, bless him, is very free and perfect with the one-liner thing, right? And so when he's like, "Oh, Woodstock, 3 years running, the best man," like he's telling you, like he's watched this film for 3 years. And what I love about this, and again, I'm not gonna die on a hill because I don't think it's particularly well directed. I think it works because of the script and the actors and other things. But it feels to me, at least watching this, there is an attempt to make him very small in a prosaic big screen. One man this, one man this. See, it's boring, but that's what he's doing. It's very film school, if I'm going to be honest. But when you see him pull up in this hot car, Mustang, whatever, and he goes in, and then you see even the way we do the thing, to Justin's point, it's like he's alone and he sees a crowd watching Woodstock. And again, in 71, people didn't have certain political feelings about Heston that some of us Gen Xers might have later. But I promise you, in 1971, having Moses himself mouth the dialogue to Woodstock is also as progressive as Rosalind Cash going, "Hey, hon, birth control," right? There's a lot of nuances going on in this movie, but the way that the director is trying to say he's alone against a tapestry, that's the thing. And then the immediate hard cut, because with the zombies or whatever you want to call them, when it gets dark, the bad guys come out at night. He can run around at day. That's the basic.
What's interesting about this?
You do a hard cut to downtown LA. This is the contrary to popular belief. That shot right there is not from a week ago. That is actually from.
No, well, the irony. The great irony of this. The great irony of this movie is. The great irony of this movie is downtown LA actually looks better in this movie than it does now.
Well, there's the scene in the opening with the 2 dead bodies on the roof when you first. That's the first indication that something is wrong. And I think that is the bar called Perch now. It's like this.
I love the part where they go past the school and you see it's Easter. There's the Easter display.
And
I also, as much as, and again,
Tracy, before you go further, on the scene where he's in the movie theater, there's a thing where it's like if you start breaking this movie down using just its internal logic, he should have never let himself get in this situation because he's in a dark room where they.
I thought about that too. Yeah.
But the thing is, because Heston is selling it to you, you're like, okay, I'm in. It doesn't matter. Like I disregard it. Like I note it and then I'm past it. It doesn't stop.
Well, but also, who knows if that place isn't booby trapped, if he hasn't gone through and like scoped it out in advance, like that would be another 5 minutes of the movie.
And I want
like there could
shout out to people who are listening to our podcast and can't see us. Jeff Luce, we love you as always. Jeff brings up a good point. Woodstock held over for 3 years. I think Gen X is the last generation that knows what held over means in the movie business. And you're right.
True.
It ended. So this is part of that thing that this film is dated, but there's also a purity of it. And what I was going to say, because I think Justin, as always, nails the cinematic truth of things, which is why I think he's, and I don't say this lightly, I'm a snob, y'all, but I wouldn't say it, but I mean it. I think Justin is actually the Gen X historian of our age, and you're really lucky to be hearing from him. So I'm just going to keep saying that. He doesn't say that. I get to say this for him because I mean that, and that's why I keep asking him to like summon the sandbox that Todd and I and Ted created. But one of the things, to his point, it's not well directed, true story, but there is an iconic scene, and I remember seeing it as a little kid because my dad showed this to me when I was too young. Mom was like, "Oh, Charles Heston," and I was like, "Whatever." Dad and I watched this, and I had a hangover memory. I'm not saying this guy is Kubrick, but there's a scene where we go from, look, we're in downtown LA. It looks scary as hell. I don't know why there's a 1950s car parked in 1971. Probably because that's a producer's car. But let's forget that. And then
they don't build them like they used to, Tracy.
And then we go into Joe Biden's Aviators. I mean, Charlton Heston's Aviators. It's all good. Where he starts to look weird because we're like, wait, where am I with Charlton Heston? And again, in 1971, he's Moses, so we trust him. So trust the cinema bona fides that he brings to this. And he starts to hear, what does he hear?
Telephones.
And then we do a Zoom, which I never think people should do. And so we go between this situation, and it is him just like, and it's this thing where I think it's a very creative way as a directorial device, because Heston in performance sells it, not the director. I'm alone and I hear things, and this obviously phones aren't ringing.
There is no phone ringing, damn it.
For anybody,
Heston's selling this, and I don't always think he's our best actor. I think he's a best movie star. And this is where this happens. And the way that we intercut with this, when you hear the audible of this, you're like, my God. And it's such a smart way to start this narrative out, because you love him, you embrace him, you're alone with him, and then there's a ring, and there's a
so what is that?
I have to say this real fast. The thing with the zooms became zoom lenses. I don't know when they first got big. I want to say the 60s, but the zoom lenses were so overused in the 60s and into the 70s. And so Seagal I can't criticize him, but so much for that. Bob Fust, wonderful director, used to say it's visual masturbation. And I mean, and he's right. It's so annoying. Like, for instance, if you ever, God help you, if you ever sit through Michael Winter's Western Lawman, it's like zoom, 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 zoom,
I have,
zoom.
By the way.
Oh, that movie. Michael Winter was such a colossal asshole, and he had no style whatsoever. He made a couple of good movies, but most of the time he was just a sick, arrogant monster who was going crazy with the zoom lens. But the the thing about Heston is, like, he wasn't afraid to play squirrely characters and assholes. Yeah. He always used to say, his wife, Lydia, used to say, you always play heels. You're always playing heels. Like, for instance, The Naked Jungle that George Pal produced. He's a guy who's been in the jungle way, way, way too long. And he has this male in South America. in his plantation, and he gets his mail order bride. She shows up, and it's the wonderful Eleanor Parker, and she's the one who's like grounded and mature and sexually mature and has her shit together. And he's a screwball, and ultimately it's her that kind of turns everything around.
By the
But
way,
of course,
I want to build on this because Justin is the
please
historian.
go right ahead.
I'm lucky to have Justin here tonight. Everything you just said, yes. My favorite version of that, because I think it's a better film, is The Lady Eve, where it's the same setup. Henry Fonda, who was super hot when he was young. Young Henry Fonda, I've been up in the thing, the ale that saved Yale, and all this kind of stuff. He's been in the Amazon.
Yeah.
Right? And Stanwyck screws with Henry Fonda, this heir apparent. And to your point, Henry Fonda was hot. To be fair, Stanwyck was the bigger star, so that. But Heston was a bigger star with what you're talking about, and he was okay playing the heel because he understood the narrative point of what he was doing. The way that Henry Fonda seems a little bit like super clueless with Stanwyck, which is why she gets to play 3 roles, and he doesn't think it's the same woman, and that whole thing, which is the Preston Sturges, Lady Eve. But I feel like there was something interesting, and I just want to bring this into our conversation about the film because we're talking about film from 1971, where Charlton Heston is playing on even field with a black female lead, Rosalind Cathy. That was not common, y'all. And what's interesting is when Stanwyck was owning Henry Fonda in that Preston Sturges beautiful script with The Lady Eve, women had no power in the world. Stanwyck gets top billing over Fonda in that film. So there's a parallel. If you like that sexual dynamic between men and women, I would suggest that Stanwyck over Fonda in Sturges' perfect romantic comedy, which
Lady Eve's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
But Heston is actually cool with that in 71 as America's changing. So God help me, I want to give him more points for allowing that, because a star of his stature could have been like, no, get me blonde bimbo, whatever.
Or he could have saved her. There's only one scene in the movie effectively where there's the bit where Lincoln Kilpatrick is sneaking up behind her and he shoots him, but it's not like she's got a machine gun. If she had seen Lincoln Kilpatrick, she would have killed him. Right. Right. She knows she's capable of it. There's really not, but there's also something interesting. There was there were 2 deleted scenes, and I have like a few photos from them, but I wish I had more. It's something that's fascinated me since I was a kid. Watch the end credits of the movie with that wonderful solarized reverse negative Heston Jesus image, and that beautiful music. But so anyway, in the end credits, it says something like "Woman in Cemetery Crypt" or "Girl in Cemetery Crypt," Anna Aries. And even as a kid, I'd watch it and I'd go, "Woman in Cemetery Crypt? What is this?" So what happened was there was, to make a long story short, before they leave the city, Lisa tells Neville, she says, "I'm going to visit my parents' graves before I go." And this was all shot. This was filmed. So she goes to the cemetery, and it's all overgrown. They make a point of saying it's overgrown. It hasn't been tended. Unlike certain apocalyptic TV shows I could mention.
You mean like
Dead,
where everyone mows the lawns? Like
could be. But no. So anyway, she goes there, and it's fascinating because she and Richie have obviously buried their mom and dad, and they have this very simple grave that they've taken like pop bottles and they've marked around the edges of it with it. And there's a grave, and it has the parents' names and everything. And she's talking at the grave, and she goes, "Mom and Dad, I know you saw terrible times in your life, but you've never seen anything like what we're going through." And she's talking to him, and it's something like, it says something about they were from, like, it was either Montgomery, Alabama or Selma, Alabama. So there's this whole point about that. Like, it's just a little subtle thing. Anyway, she hears this crying. Hears this crying, and she's got a machine. She's in a dress. She's got a machine gun, and she follows she's listening, and she follows, and there's a crypt in the cemetery, and she opens the door carefully, and she looks in, and the light goes down, and she sees a mutant woman sitting there on the floor crying with a dead mutant baby.
Oh.
And she's like, and she goes, and instead of shooting the woman or anything, she just goes, she's obviously like really horrified, and she goes, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, and shuts the door and leaves. So anyway, then there's a scene with her. Now there's more. She goes back to see Neville, and I know this was shot. I've seen, like I said, I've got pictures from it. She goes, yeah, I saw it. She's obviously shaken up, and she tells Neville, she goes, yeah, I was in the cemetery. I saw one of the women, and he goes, did you kill her? And he goes, no, I didn't. He goes, I'm not in the habit of killing mothers. And then she says, because I might be where she's at in a few months. And it turns out she is pregnant with Neville's baby. Wow. And this is also, so there was that, and it was all shot. And then so like he hugs her and he consoles her. And, you know, there's this also, there's a fascinating element to this movie. There are forces in our world that actively want to heal racial wounds, and there are others that want to salt them. And this is a movie about healing racial wounds. This is about getting past things and moving on and moving forward. And it's but then, and that also gets into something in The Stand. There's the girl, one of the main characters is pregnant. She's pregnant, and she's terrified her baby's going to be born dead because of the plague. And this is exactly what Lisa's worrying about. And it adds this whole, if that scene were in there, the scene where she has the plague would add on, there's something even more deeply disturbing about it.
Well, and it also would add some support and weight to actually making Matthias seem less of a cartoon villain because of his conversation with Lincoln Kilpatrick about forgetting the old ways.
Yeah.
You know, and it'd be like, oh my gosh, if these two guys, and then, you know, what is interesting, because if you think about it, I know we're going all out of order with the movie, but it ties in with Eric Landeville's Richie character going and talking to Matthias, because that scene is kind of, you know, Richie's got the right idea, but where did he get it? And the scene you just described is like, that would be a logical place of where he would get it.
Yes.
And the idea that Matthias was having this conversation with Lincoln Kilpatrick about forgetting the old ways, it really ties all of those threads together in a way that they didn't in the final version.
I want to give props to Jeff Luce. This is why we should probably do the miniseries version of this. I think it's interesting. I want to get through a little bit more of the story context for people who are listening.
Sure.
So I think there's the iconic, the phones, we go between the toggle of this, you kind of get the situation. And then we get to the point where Neville comes home to his safe space, he thinks. And if you look to screen right, you've got to me, they look like Eyes Wide Shut wannabe extras.
Well, this is just like a post Dodgers game situation going on right here.
I wish like going through Hollywood Bowl traffic was that much fun.
If we were allowed machine guns, it would be.
Justin for the win. But I want to highlight some stuff because I think we got the best historian of our generation here tonight, so we're gonna take advantage. I feel like this shot, this is Neville's where he lives. He's like retrofitted it. It's great. It's where he lives alone. If you are watching this post-COVID, this is probably where if you were lucky, you sheltered in place. But what's interesting, because I don't think there's a lot of, to Justin's point earlier, directorial, shall we say, flourishes. There's a couple that work that I do want to, I got a screenshot of this. It's like China, it's Russia, which in the 70s, much like now, were the fear factor. So part of the interpretation from what Matheson wrote in 1971, what the plague was and how it would play out, they felt the need to put Russia over a map, which is interesting. But we very quickly get that Heston is alone, and he's walking around in lonely Los Angeles, and he's dressed up as a character. He plays chess. He had this great moment where he's like later in the movie, he looks at his visage in the same shot. He goes, "I'm a narcissist." It's played for laughs, but I don't know why he does this. It's an odd character choice. But and again, I just want to give a shout out. This is 1971. Charlton Heston is not in his 20s, 30s, or 40s. And he's like, "This is my time to take my shirt off. Thank you, sir." Because we used to be able to look at real people, and I want to give a shout out. But then we see the crazy makeup of the situation. We quickly get into this is like, oh, there was a toxic, let's call it COVID plague.
Oh no, those are actually the first two people who saw Joker Filet-O-Fish on streaming.
Oh, I see what you did there, and I'm liking the food pun.
They would have been better off sniffing glue.
Oh,
Well, wouldn't we all? But what I want to do, and again, I look, love this film. That's why we're here. We're really celebrating it. But there's a couple shots where I felt like it was like, oh, this is someone in film school who's trying. And I think it's not quite the MASH opening sequence, but it's like, so we have Heston in this helicopter. He crashes because whatever is in the air, thanks to Russia and apparently China.
Yeah, and then he lands on a set. He lands on a very obvious set.
He does. Right. But here's one of the things I also want to give props to Heston, which I never thought I would do because hashtag. We go from this to he crashes badly, unfortunate color of blood. But look how close Chuck Heston is to the flames. Yes, I realize they're using camera lenses to make it look closer. But this guy is so in it with bad makeup, doing the thing. He gets out because he's Chuck Heston, because Moses, right? He goes back to his penthouse of love. And then we've got, I think Mark referenced this earlier, the maggots. I mean, the people who are zombies.
Nice try, Tracy.
Sorry.
I gotta throw in one thing. The weird thing about Seagal is like there are random shots that work so well with I'll give you there's like a couple that just get me every time that I love so much are when he flips the switch on the generator and the lights come on in front of the house, and then you cut to the sort of like vegetation out front and the fountain, and you see about 4 of the creatures, the mutants, scuttling away, and they scuttle like rodents in a room. When you cut the light on in a room where there are rats, and the way they scuttle off, and they don't linger on it or anything, it just really registers well. It's good almost in spite of Boris Seagal. And I say this, I'm giving him a hard time, but I love this movie. I just wish, what if this movie had been directed by like Richard Fleischer or or Gordon Douglas or somebody who really knew what, or like Robert Aldrich, Now, interestingly, I'll quit right after this. Heston had done Major Dundee with Peckinpah. And to show you what a mensch Heston was, he gave up his salary to keep Sam Peckinpah on that movie. But he actually considered, when this was in its early stages, he suggested that they potentially go after Peckinpah to direct it. And to think, Peckinpah doing this would have, not only was he at the top of his game, this is like Peckinpah in like the Wild Bunch, Ballad of Cable Hogue, the Getaway era, but also Peckinpah's movies are about the last hero, the holdover from an era that's dying, who is being subsumed by a new time.
Justin, I don't think you and I have ever said this, but one of my favorite lines is Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, where Pike, right, William Holden, always by North Star, we have to think beyond our guns. Like Peckinpah already knew that when he did that. And the irony of saying we have to think beyond our guns, and then the poetic opera of the Gatling gun that leads us into the conclusion of the Wild Bunch is interesting, because I think different audiences could read different things into it now, but the power of the dramatic arc of we have to think beyond our guns. When Pike says that, and we know they're going to go into that link, and what's interesting, and I just want to bring this up as like, I'm the chick on the program, I get to do it. one of the things that's so great about Omega Men, I think, is that there is this weird love story, and it's not about you're the only woman, I'm the only man, because that's just sex. It's like this chick is so smart and this guy is so smart. They connect on this weird level that's both spiritual, intellectual, and everything. And Cash is so cool.
And she saved his life. She saved his ass. He and she and I have to and the great Paul Koslow, who was a wonderful guy and a great actor. They saved him. They saved his ass.
Justin, let's take a pause for people who are listening on Spotify or whatever. Rosalind Cash saves Charlton Heston's life in a 1971 Warner Brothers film. I don't want to hear people who have feelings about Heston as a man talk about anything other than this guy said that's a good plot point. That's progressive, and stop looking through a lens. We have to call out 1971 badassery, and I want to do that. And Heston was all in on it. And there was and I think, Justin, you will know this as a historian, Rosalind Cash gave a few interviews for the movie, and they were a version of, I'm not going to quote her exactly, where she said, and Heston quoted it because I think he thought it was cute because he was much older.
Yeah.
She's like, I grew up watching you playing all these amazing figures, and it's really hard to kiss you, and I don't know, and this and that, because she was looking at him as a movie star who played iconic characters.
Right, well, she said something like, there was this quote he used to mention where she said something like, "It gives me an eerie feeling screwing Moses."
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, and he was
like, I'm a black girl, and that's where I'm coming from because that's how I know you on film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give her permission to be like, girl.
Well, and also I'll throw this in about Roz Cash. I really got deep into this movie starting when I was about 13. Like I just fell in love with it. And I got really interested in Roz Cash. Like I just thought she's amazing. And so I would watch anything she was in, from like Dr. Black and Mr. Hyde. She's great in Hickey and Boggs, Monkey Hustle, on and on and on.
Justin, I don't usually get to have a historian like you. Can you, in 20 seconds, pitch Hickey and Boggs for people who haven't seen it? Because Robert Culp only directed one movie, and it was Hickey and Boggs, and I think it's really important. Can you just 10 seconds that for people?
Hickey and Boggs is Robert Culp doing the Anti-I Spy, which was the show that he starred in with Bill Cosby, where they play slick, funny, glib, handsome, well-dressed spies. Hickey and Boggs is about the two biggest loser, schlubby, nothing, failure as men and as detectives actually coming through on a big case. Written by Walter Hill, only movie Robert Culp directed. Yes, Bill Cosby is a completely reprehensible person, but it's a fantastic movie, and I can't lie and say it's not.
By the way, Justin just did the thing. Do you see why he's the great historian? 20 seconds in, we're back into our podcast. Moving on.
Yes.
Justin, let's talk about the catapult situation. I want to get to this because, Justin, pay attention to the outfits. People who are not watching our podcast but listening, you're missing a great still where Heston is in a green dinner jacket with a Napoleonic kind of situation where he's shooting down.
This is long before Seinfeld had a puffy shirt.
With an infrared shirt, with an infrared scope. He has an infrared scope, night vision scope.
Justin, are you okay with me showing what?
Please, go right ahead.
You guys, Justin is not only the best writer / historian of our generation, if you're Gen X. He found this shirt, and then he fucking wore the jacket. I'm not here to say who wore it better because I'm supposed to.
But it fit. I will note it fit. Notice it fit.
Here's my thing. Okay, I am here. I think Justin wore it better than Charlton Heston. And Mark, do you have any fashions? How fucking cool is Justin?
It's funny because I think I found out about that picture and about that jacket at some point when Justin and I were at Stephen Peros's house watching some movie. Might have been The Exorcist, could have been anything. I don't know. It was one of Stephen's 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
And Omega Man happened to come up in conversation, and Justin said, "Oh, I just
put this on, y'all.
I just wore that jacket," and then immediately I'm like, I must know this person. I have to know this person.
Well, and I cataloged it. I not only that, I cataloged a lot of Charlton Heston's estate for Bonham's auctions when they were selling them in 2016, I think. And I reconnected. The jacket's velvet, Jeff. The jacket was green velvet. It was very comfortable and it was in great shape. So anyway, they had put the Frilly Edwardian shirt in another lot, and I checked the dates on it and I checked the labels, and I realized this goes with that. That was it. Yeah. So anyway, I reconnected them and they were sold as a lot. I wish I could have afforded it. And that's the Omega. There aren't a ton of movies, believe it or not, there aren't a ton of movies that I would badly want a proper costume from, but the Omega Man and Soylent Green are way, way, way up on the list. Way up on the list.
Well, I was, my Soylent Green trivia is that I was watching a documentary about video games over the weekend, and one of Atari's, or rather the founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, one of his first machines, computer arcade game machines.
So one Lee Taylor Young's playing.
Yeah, she was playing, and of course it was not commercially successful because it was very difficult, apparently, for people to play. But she did well. So
it's cool looking. It looks like, what I love about it is it looks like what they thought the future would look like in 1973, which is wonderful. You know, you used to be a nice guy once.
It's so good.
The hell it is. It's Sunday. I always dress for dinner on Sunday.
It's a combination of like Robinson Crusoe and Downtown LA and this kind of pre-Castaway.
I'm going to go through quickly the story. So he's alone. Neville thinks he's alone, and then he sees like the hottest chick on the planet. One of my favorite motifs in this movie when we go to directing is people lighting candles when they have a 4K in their face and they don't clearly need a candle. If you're watching the podcast, you see that we don't need a candle. But then Neville gets picked up by a bunch of MAGA, the thing, and he is like, "So, what are we doing?" And so there's that. And so because they are MAGA, they wear black robes and it's not eyes wide shut, and they're fake Christians. Obviously, they have to like do a Wicker Man situation because it's 1971, bitches. And
so they put the dunce cap is my favorite part of that.
The dunce cap that they knock off because they don't even understand. I was like, this is pretty much how the Tea Party became the MAGAs, but that's a different podcast. Follow us. But what I love about Heston, because he doesn't want to be a counterculture figure, but he's living through the counterculture, that he's so freaking cool. He's making the most progressive sci-fi, lo-fi, whatever between Soylent Green, Planet of the Apes, as we've said, and obviously Omega Man. And then he's dead. In any other version's movie, he's over. And here again, I just have to say, as the token chick on the program, Warner Brothers was like, Moses is fucked. Hashtag the rebels are going to get him out. Rosalind Cash, because she's probably more beautiful than everybody else associated with said group, puts it together, and they get him out because he should have been burned alive, Wicker Man style. And then she says, "Look, man, what is your problem?" He's able to talk himself out of it. He's like, "I can't believe there are people. This is amazing." And because he's still like the white action star in 71, he's like, "You should be on the back of the motorcycle." I'm thinking Rosalind's probably a better driver, but whatever. This is how we filmed the scene because 1971, and she leads him into this, I don't know, probably up over Laurel Canyon, if I'm imagining it correctly. And it turns out that there are people that are left. He's not the last man alone. And again, I have to say, if you are watching this film in 1971 and you see these haircuts and this perhaps for some unfortunate wardrobe situation, you're thinking Manson family. So there's a layer that may not be beyond that, but then you realize there is this boy who is transitioning into, he's a black boy who's transitioning into whatever the hell Neville is, white. I want to say MAGA, but like, let's pretend I didn't say MAGA. MAGA is totally MAGA. And so that is what we have to save him from. And then all of a sudden, like, the coolest chick alive is like, yeah, Charlton, let's make it happen. Look at my Mrs. Roper situation. With a machine gun, we do the thing. They hook up. He's like, oh my God, we had such great sex. And then she's wearing a lab jacket because he's actually the scientist, and they're trying to figure out how to use his blood, because when he inoculated himself with the rare situation, Charlton Heston's character is now like, I'm good. I can't get.
Yeah, he had a prototype vaccine for the
Right.
plague that had
Exactly.
destroyed the world, basically. Yeah.
And because Biden's not in power, we don't have any plan to get it into arms. So that's why we're here. And so, but the black boy, once he's saved by the white savior, hashtag, I understand, cancel. You're wrong if you're doing that. I see you. The black boy who needs to transition through the power of science, Heston saves him. And so then something happens. Heston is in the lab. Rosalind Cash, because he's like, I'm a man of 19.
More of a number one on the call sheet savior.
Totally.
Less of a white savior.
So-
Yeah, no, I'm not going to say, I can't say white savior here because, you know, he's this is 1971. Warner Brothers was not ready to have, I think, a black science fiction leading man. This is 1971. We have to look at this realistically. This is kind of like when you look at Seven Faces of Dr. Lowe, people go, oh, well, it's got Tony Randall in Yellowface. It's like, well, there's a lot of reasons why he plays a Chinese character who is the hero of the film and who saves everybody's lives. It was wonderful, and no one ever left that movie disliking Chinese people. But there were no Chinese leading men. I mean, there is no one who could. You couldn't have Key Luke open a movie for MGM. I mean, you could, but it would make about 3 cents from a. I mean, the movie industry is not a humanitarian enterprise.
No,
it is a money making enterprise. So I'm not going to call him a white savior. I will not do that. If this movie were made in 2005. And he saved everybody's hash, then he's a white savior, and they'd probably make a lot more of it. But
by the way, I don't think he's a white savior either. But for people who are listening and can't see the screen, Jeff Luce, as always, brings up an interesting point. I always have mad respect for performers who can perform alone when no one is there to react off of. I mean, I think of Castaway. I think of with Tom Hanks. I think of Sandra Bullock in Gravity. Absolutely. But what I do want to say, you know, to Justin's point, I mean, it's interesting because 71, if we're being honest, right, we're in Vietnam and predominantly black and brown are fighting in Vietnam, not rich white people, which Heston personifies. Don't read into that. Don't put it through a filter. What's interesting is that, again, Heston, as much as he gives, I'm using my white most privilege, if we're going to use a modern, to Rosalind Cash, who owns this movie, he also is a supporting character to the scenes with the black boy, who is like, but if we're going to change this, we have to change this who believes, the black boy believes in the better version of America. And
he's raising good questions. And he's
the
raising questions. He's raising smart questions that Heston can't answer. And he found the nest that Heston hasn't been able to find for ages.
Right.
He's been looking and looking, and Heston's just stymied because he's like, holy shit, they were in the courthouse the whole time.
Right,
and he doesn't know what to do.
But yes, Justin just pitched the plot points. But I just, again, as the token white chick, in 1971, the fact that the black boy is like, hey, Moses, here's where they are, and you couldn't find them, and I know, Avi. That's basically the plot point. But the thing that's kind of beautiful is that Heston he does all the things to save this black boy. And the black boy is like, I'm beyond you. And I want to do this thing because he wants to believe in the better angels of our nature, which of course sets him up to be like, hey guys, and he's going to be wiped out because he believes in the greater good. And that's exactly
naive, but in a very naive way. He doesn't. He's too young. I mean, think about what he's been through for the last 3 years. I mean,
it's an honest story beat that I don't want to have 24 people debate. That would have happened.
And the incident with Richie in the courthouse, when he finds the nest and he attempts to confront Anthony Zerbe's Matthias, it really, when Heston goes after him and discovers what happened to him, it really sets off a chain of events where it almost, at least this is my impression anyway, it shakes Neville into the point of, okay, we need to get out of here. We can do this better. We need to get out of here. So he's going to go back and get Lisa. He's going to get the serum, and they're going to get out of Dodge. And of course, Matthias,
and he risks going out after dark. He knowingly risks going out after dark to save the kid.
Right.
I mean, he's but
here's something I want to ask to both the men in this podcast, because I was curious about it. I think this film is so progressive and really awesome, despite maybe not the best direction, but the writing is like one of the things that I think is a cheat in this movie that if it were better revealed would elevate the film. So I would like, actually, because Justin, you're you, so hashtag be Stephen Beschloss. I want Mark to answer first, and then Stephen, as men on the podcast who watch this film and we're talking about it. One of the things that I had a question about as a woman in 2024 watching it, as if I haven't watched it 1 or 2 times since I was like 12, that stood out to me. And so I want to hear if you're 2 of my favorite men. Mark first. It's a cheat, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. Convince me I'm wrong. Fight me. That Rosalind Cash goes and she's like, look, we're going to go to the mountains. We're going to do the thing. We're going to get the kids. We're going to do the thing. We're going to that. And she shops and we see her looking at dresses. That's what girls do. That's what I was told. And then we cut and we don't see what happens. And then the next time we see her, because she's there at noon and apparently shops for hours. And then there's a reflection shot of like she's dropping the bags of what she's bought, and you see the mega, whatever we're calling the mega mop coming at her. And then there's a reveal, which upset me as a young girl. It upsets me now later. I'm going to call her Karen. But as the 2 awesome gents here, Mark goes first, then Justin, we don't know what actually happens to Lisa, and this happens. What is your take on this moment? How do you feel about this? And because we didn't see her convert, we don't know what happened. As 2 awesome guys, historian, writer, producers, what's your take? Mark, you go first. What's that thing we didn't see on camera? How do you read it?
Well, I mean, they did acknowledge earlier in the film that everybody in their little camp up in the hills had succumbed to the disease and was at different progression levels. So I didn't react with a huge amount of surprise to it. Didn't she reveal herself to Neville in the apartment where she kind of undoes this head wrap that she has on before she reveals him, before she reveals herself.
That's the next scene. That's the next scene.
Yeah. In this particular instance, I felt like this was his last chance for Neville. This was his last chance, and I hate to put it in the context of his character, but I do.
He doesn't see this yet. We are seeing this because Neville's not in the scene.
I think
see her convert.
If we're plugged into what's happening to him, we're already crushed at this point because she was his last chance at kind of what he considered to be a normal life, the potential to build another normal life. At least that's what I took from it.
So did it throat punch you, Mark, or how?
Very much so. Yeah, because you're like as we discussed earlier in the show, it's like she was a unique character for the era in that she had the level of agency that she did. She had her own agenda, and I haven't gone so far as to analyze this from a Bechdel test standpoint, but I think there's got to be many situations, except for the scenes where she's actually in it with him. But no, for me, it was the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh shit, how's this gonna go? So
I think the problem.
Justin, how did you feel?
I think the problem with it is it's awkwardly established. I like it as a scene. Like, I love the camera movement and her removing the wrap from her hair and everything. But the problem is
can I time out before you finish? Because you guys are nerds, so I get to ask two men that I never get to ask. Did anyone see Rosalind doing the thing as an equivalent to the Claude Rains Invisible Man?
No. I think it
shot similarly badly, but the same.
It just works. It just works well. That's the way you would do it. I think but I think the way they set it up is earlier on. It goes, they could turn at any time. I think Paul Kozlo says they could turn at any time. So that's kind of like that's kind of the get out of jail free card. But it's kind of awkwardly established. It's Boris Sagal, I think.
I get that. Okay.
But I love the scene. I love that scene.
No, I love that about whatever. And I also want to say, like, not to like whatever, but in 1971 you could kill a child actor. Today, people are like, you can't kill children.
In a PG movie. And people are getting squibbed left. The mutants are getting squibbed left and right. You've got Roz Cash topless. I mean, it's like PG meant nothing.
And the photo there you have of Eric Laneville, I mean, that they cut to a wider angle and you see exactly what happened to him. And you're just like, wow.
Was he stabbed? I can't remember. What was it?
Oh yeah, I think he was impaled on the judge's chair or whatever that was it.
I can't remember because I know one of the other shots that always gets me is early on when Lincoln Kilpatrick dies and he falls and he's impaled on the fence.
Yeah,
and that's a good stunt. When that fall the guy takes is really well done. Yeah.
We're wrapping it up. So Neville has the girl. They've had great sex. That could be the couple. They're like, fuck you. We don't need reproduction, whatever. And then you see this guy. I mean, it's not Evita, but that happens. And so we quickly look back on where, Charlton Heston is like, I'm going to try to blow this guy away in this fountain outside of the situation. And then, Nevin throws it, he gets impaled, and then we cut to the next day because apparently Charlton Heston can just bleed to death in the fountain. And then these guys show up, the guys from Spawn Ranch, I mean not MAGA, I mean whatever, these guys. So they're here, and he's like, oh God. And there's this moment where it's like the kids are like looking at him, and I think it's really instructional. Like Heston is dying, he's bleeding out in a fountain in front of his former penthouse, and I think they picked blood or red because they wanted it to read on camera, which it would probably be not red, whatever. So the idea is that Lisa, we can turn her back like we did the black boy who died. So this is the science that Neville's last gift is giving to keep everybody alive and move on. And so you're like, okay, just as I'm sitting with that, and
Well,
then
oh, sorry. Oh, it's the idea that his blood is going to cleanse the world.
Yeah, it's a Christ thing. It's like the blood will redeem them, and then he falls. He's basically dead. I mean, by the time they find him, he just flops right. He lives long enough to give them the blood. Yeah, yeah.
But what's instructional, and it would be, as film nerds, if we don't point out that the last shot in this movie, which was not written this way, which Heston demanded to have happen from at least 3 interviews I've read.
Yes.
Now that he's saved everybody, and here's the science, because it turns out science in 1971, we believed, this happens. And so then Moses is crucified in a fountain of whateverness. And this is the part where we have to imagine his panacea will make Prometheus and happy or whatever.
Right.
But the idea that he's the white savior, he's the science guy, he's the white guy who's like, here's the panacea, you go forward, the kids get to live. Lisa will probably transition because we've already proven she can. And the happy ending is Moses fucking crucified in a Warner Brothers movie, and
in a big pool of blood, of blood-soaked water. Well, also, I think one of my favorite moments in this scene, and it's, I mean, Paul Koslo I knew him. He was a great guy, and he was a fantastic actor. And this was like maybe Paul's 2nd or 3rd movie. I mean, he's fantastic in it. But there's that great, he has that line earlier. He goes, we'll start over again like it was the Garden of Eden, except this time we won't trust any friggin' snakes. And there's this moment when he looks at the kids and he looks at the blood and he goes, well, kids, come on, we got a long way to go. And it's a great way to end it, because it's after everything you've seen for the last hour and 40 minutes or whatever. It's not just we have a long way to go, as in we need to beat it out of this godforsaken city. We have a long way to go as a species.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful way to end it. By the way, Heston didn't push that Christ thing. In his memoirs, he actually says, he goes, I shot the last scene today, he goes, which may or may not have been a Christ metaphor. And I think he sort of knew it was, but he wasn't busting there. He wasn't that stupid. The interesting thing about, I'm going to say something. I went through his notes on this movie. He would write long. He really put a ton of thought into what he was doing. And one of the points he made that I always thought was so interesting was he said, the weird irony of this story is, without Matthias, without this horrible enemy, without the family, he has nothing to live for. And he said, if there was no Matthias, he would probably be sitting in, I can't remember exactly how he put it, but it was like he would be sitting in the nicest penthouse in LA drinking 20-year-old scotch and watching stag movies. I mean, it would be like, it's just, there's nothing. So in a weird way, they keep each other going. Mm-hmm. You know, they're the yin to, he's the yin to Matthias's yang. It's like they give each other this messed up sense of purpose. And
but I will look, I'm not going to argue with the great Chuck Heston on this, because I think this film, actually, I've said this to a couple of friends, because I had a conversation, because I loved the Mark movie movie, and I knew that Justin loved it. I was like, Justin, will you do this with us? Because I mean, and my nerd girlfriends who disappoint me, I was like, girls, like, this is really awesome. And here's the thing, this book, because Rosalind is a boss, even though, yes, if we want to be granular, he's too old or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's moments in this movie where I feel like, and this, it's a different era, but if you're the last man on the planet, it's like you miss sex, you miss women if you're straight. And so it's okay to give that. And I think Rosalind does. And I think it's actually kind of a gorgeous moment. And I think it's actually really feminist because I think she chooses him. And if you want to read it as a sex thing, okay. Look, I'm the girl who likes Alien 3. When Sigourney looks at Charles Dance and goes, I've been out here a long time, I'm like, get you. Like, I don't think it's not feminist, but I think there is a Heston Cash thing. And if we're not going to support love at the end of the world, I don't know what we're fighting for. And I don't think someone's position about politics or what they think was Heston's politics needs to impact this. What I think is gorgeous about this movie, in 1971, Warner Brothers released it because Heston said yes. Matheson is a god. They had a pretty good script, if not a great director. I think they achieved greatness, which is why we're still talking about this movie tonight, all of us. I think it's really progressive in ways that if you want to be triggered by whatever triggers you in 2024.
Well, let me throw in one thing. I want to throw in one thing before
I wrap up though, and then I throw it to Justin. This is 1971. By the way, none of us on this podcast were alive when this film came out. Right. So we're all watching it at different points in our life. And the power of the film, which I want to lift, is that all of us who were not alive when this came out love it for different reasons. And it's been copied and mirrored. I'm throwing it to Justin, who's the better writer. Go.
Well, I was just going to say one of my favorite scenes in the movie as I get older, for a lot of reasons, is and I say this as a curator too, it affects me very deeply as a curator, is where Neville has been captured by the family. He's being held down by a couple of their thugs, and Matthias is talking about how we'll destroy and rebuild, and Chairman Mao's year one, and won't that be wonderful? And so anyway, they proceed to take clubs and axes and knives and things. And the thing about, and I'm going to get back to my main point in a second. I'm not done here, but the notice how Neville raided like probably the best art museums in Los Angeles and took all of like this great art. He did what any sensible person would do: go to an art museum and take all of this stuff. And he's got all the scientific equipment. He has God only knows what else that he has taken. So he is a different kind of conservative in the sense that he is conserving what is best of history and also what is necessary in this case, which is a ton of fucking machine guns, because he's got an army of psychopaths against him. But anyway, so the family goes through and they're destroying all of these great objects.
Oh,
Justin.
That was important. What he was about to say.
No, he's like so laying the truth.
Well, I'm just this is my cat bonsai.
Oh, there he is.
There we are. Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're destroying all of these things, and the music swells. The strings swell on the soundtrack. Like you are literally hearing these great objects screaming in agony as they're being destroyed by these horrible barbarians. And literally, when I was watching those absolutely stomach churning videos of ISIS destroying those treasures, these historic treasures, I thought of the same thing. It's people with like these barbarians. And that scene gets me. And also, I'm not finished. There's a line. It's my favorite line of Heston's. And this isn't like Heston overacting. This isn't like, Heston going off the rails. It's just a great delivery. Is where Anthony Zerbe says, what is it? He says it's something like, he goes, "We will destroy and then we'll build." And Heston goes, "Build coffins. That's all you'll need." And he says it he says it in a way that a lesser actor would totally fuck up. And he says it so perfectly. It's like, it's defiant and it's sad and it's angry and it's all of these things at once. But the look on his face as they're destroying everything is just, it's a great scene. But and again, the music's fantastic in that sequence.
I'm so glad, Justin, that you brought that up, because I think that is part in a not Kubrickian director film. What's important, but one of the things that I love about it is that, and again, I just trying to bring it back to one. If you're a Gen Xer, if you're younger, listening to this, one of the things I thought was really interesting, and it makes me really sad, because I think to what Justin just said in terms of destroying things that have meaning, which was a thematic in this film that we watched, and that Heston in 71 being down with all of it, the love story, this and that, the thematics, the irony, and I would be remiss as somebody who is an LA Conservancy person who's on the board, and I hate what LA doesn't appreciate about our culture. One of the sad things that, Justin, we've talked about, because you have pictures, you've been there, the destruction of the Warner Brothers, ranch, where we took out Nevin's kind of safe house, I guess we would say in modern parlance.
Well, it's like it was his house. He says in the movie that it was. He goes, "This is where I used to live. This is where I'm gonna live, and I'm not gonna let any albino cocksucker kick me out of here," or whatever. Yeah. But no, but it was part of that. Was the Warner Ranch on Hollywood Way in Burbank. It used to be the Columbia Ranch. This goes back to the days when Columbia was there. And you can see that backdrop, the backdrop of Neville's house it's in the beginning of Friends. Now that fountain is called the Friends Fountain. Yeah.
Justin, trust me on this, because I agree, and because sometimes younger people don't value. So when you watch the credit sequence to Friends, this thing that I've circled, this is the fountain in front of Neville's house, and if you have to have a reminder, that's behind them. This is what they're doing. So as early as 1994, the fountain and the thing right behind them, above Courtney Cox's red umbrella, is actually Charlton Heston's Neville's house on the ranch. And I just want to, again, if you like Friends, and apparently a whole generation does, I'm biased. I worked for Jennifer Aniston for 3 years. Love her. Worked on this show. You guys, there is a cross section of this situation, and Zaslav bulldozed it. It's gone.
Yeah. Well, it goes back all the way to, I think, the 50s. You can see that series of row houses, like it's in Sam Fuller's The Naked Kiss from 61. Yeah. It's on episodes of The Monkees. It's in the Naked Gun. It's Priscilla Presley lives. Her apartment house is in that neighborhood, is in that row. I think it might even be Neville's house, but it was this venerable backlot that had been around for many years. I visited it in 2017. I had a friend who was an art director, and she got me on, so I got to walk all around, and it was like a childhood dream fulfilled. But it was, the backlots, little by little, have just been destroyed in damn near every studio. I mean, the old Fox backlot and the MGM were long gone, and so it was, I guess it was kind of inevitable. But yeah, they're packing the buildings in over there. They have really been building over there.
Yeah. It's a thing. We have gone over time because # we have Justin and we have Mark, and I love you both. I mean, you guys know this. I feel very special that you both are here on the same night. I feel very lucky. What I want to talk about, Mark, you go, not just because you're like the hot guy with a hot cat on your chest. Wrap up for us, if somebody hasn't seen Omega Man, why should they watch it? Watching it, because you love it as we do. What do you love about it? Why should someone watch it? Give us a 30-second elevator pitch.
I think that people should watch this movie for the same reason that they should watch any movie made before they were born. Is that, there are history books, there are history classes, there are history teachers, but there is almost no way to actually see and hear and even feel what it was like to be alive at a certain point in time, and to understand what the assumptions are of the culture at that time. And also, one thing that this movie points out that we were talking about throughout the entire evening is this notion that the problems that we have today are not terribly new. They're just problems that have continued. So in that respect, watching these older movies gives you the ability to maybe think that these problems aren't so insurmountable, or rather that if they do seem insurmountable, they're at least something that we can live with because we have for decades, And so yeah. I would suggest also, and perfect timing there for my partner, I'll say one thing that you did point out on, constantly kind of the, MAGA, I mean, the family, as far as family. There's an interesting scene where we were talking prior to one of the earlier confrontations where they have captured Neville, and prior to the dunce cap scene where they take him to Dodger Stadium and make him buy overpriced hot dogs. Yeah. Is the notion that Neville is suggesting, like, why don't you get these people organized? Why don't you get them together? And the implication is that Matthias just has these platitudes and has no plan to go behind it. So in that respect, I was like, it was something that I didn't really realize until we were talking about it during this show, and kind of comparing that to the present day.
I love that you said this, and I'm embarrassed that I buried the Anderson family players because I was looking for a thing because I don't have a partner to do it. But I think what Mark just set up, TV, the Fourth Estate, MAGA, I mean the family. Todd Anderson and Hillary Anderson, who we absolutely adore and love and miss tonight, they did play a situation for us. So we're going to do that off of what Mark said.
Now the question is survival. Is this the end of technological man? Is this the conclusion of all our yesterdays? The boasts of our fabled science? The superhuman conquests of space and time? The age of the wheel? We were warned of its judgment. Well, here it is. Here, now, in the form of billions of microscopic bacilli. This is the...
Helen, Yeah, I see. Let's try the test vaccine 93B71. How the hell do I know? Then we'll find out. Be there in an hour.
I know who you are.
The Omega Cat.
That's I love it.
The sound design. Oh my God. How much? Todd, Hillary, thank you.
But notice how, okay. So Omega Man, a movie that's like the writing in older movies shows you just how stupid studios think audiences are. You have, they casually use words like bacilli. And they just they expect the audience to be smart enough to catch it because a lot of them probably were, and or like in Planet of the Apes where they casually use words like metallurgy. When was the last time you heard either of the words with that many syllables used in a Hollywood screenplay? You know, it's astonishing.
Hashtag correct. I know we've gone on too long. Like Justin, love you. Thank you for bringing your massive brain to this situation and playing in our sandbox. And oh my God, Mark, Avi, love you. So we're gonna do this rapid fire thing because we've gone on too long because I have no book. So we do this thing. So there's 3 lightning rounds that Mark playing Todd tonight.
1 second.
There we go.
It's all good, Justin. So our first one is going to be bad, be best. I am going to do. Mark, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go first. Yeah.
So The Awakening, because I'm building on a Charlton Heston situation. True story for me. My dad, who loved Universal Horror and shared things with me probably too young, and I love him for it. Changed my life. Loved The Mummy, loved Boris Karloff. And then because I'm that old, I was 4 and I was on his shoulders. And my Orange County family drove up to LA to see the first King Tut exhibit. And I saw King Tut. I saw all of the Egyptian stuff. And I was obsessed with Egyptian history and lore. And then maybe 5 years later, The Awakening. Stoker, public domain, story, Star of the Seven Sea, whatever. Heston also taking his clothes a lot in 1981. So 10 years after what we saw him doing in 71, he's still taking off his shirt. The idea is that he is like Howard Carter. I am going to find a thing like he's Howard Carter with King Tut. He finds an Egyptian tomb. And as he is doing this, his wife, who he's not in the delivery room with, because hashtag Heston, somehow because his wife is giving birth and he's not there, don't ask too many questions. When she turns 18, in the visage of Stephanie Zimbalist, Remington Steele to Gen Xers, she turns into the terror Egyptian queen of fuck you when she's 18. And there's, of course, inappropriate, because it was in the 80s, daughter, father, are you guys sleeping together? What's happening? Susanna York is decapitated, spoiler alert, with a really powerful glass decapitation that haunted me as a child. I love this movie. I think it is not great and flawed, but pulls in all the things, and I understand that it's inappropriate. I love it. Mark, you go first.
And this is for Be Bad or Be Best.
Be bad, be best. Be bad is so bad. Fuck you. Be bad. It's kind of bad, but it's
Well, you got me when you said Stephanie Zimbalist, so I'm like, I'm
Oh,
gonna say Be
I
Best.
love
So
that about you. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right with the still. Okay.
and it, and I'll tell you another thing. I haven't seen this film, but
You
the poster. No, I haven't. But I'll tell you the other reason that I'm going to categorize for Be Best, and there's absolutely no logical reason to connect these things together, is that image reminds me of the opening of the Hanna-Barbera Johnny Quest cartoon. Because
Dun 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 dun. Coin,
exactly.
coin.
So that's this goes back to picking films by the box art and the video store way back in the day. Just be like, that looks
Good old
good.
days.
Is that how you found it?
Me?
Yeah, you saw it.
No. I remember seeing that one. I was.
But you
I
remember
didn't-
seeing it.
No, I haven't seen it. No, I was.
You remember seeing the box.
Yes, I did see the box.
God bless. Okay, Justin, have you seen The Awakening?
Not in a million years, but you know what? I can't say it's either bad or best, because there are so many. Heston did so many bill paying movies. Like he liked to work, so he worked and he was in a ton of stuff. But he did a whole string of movies that are just like, they're just okay. Like they're not terrible, but you wouldn't really want to watch them a second or third time. Like Counterpoint, where he's a conductor, and Number One, where he's the world's skinniest quarterback, and Call of the Wild. And then there are some that are just duds, like Julius Caesar, which is like one of the great tragedies of 70s cinema, because you have Julius Caesar with a million great actors, and it's just so lame in so many ways. And Heston, I think, was the first to admit it. But no, I haven't seen The Awakening in a long time.
Okay. Everybody, trust me, believe me later. Watch The Awakening. It's freaking fun, man. Okay. So Mark has his Be Bad, Be Best. This is Mark's choice. Black Moon, bitches.
Oh my goodness,
Mark,
yes.
Talk to us.
This is this movie is it's from that era. I got to look up what year that was. It was like 85, something like that. Hang on. 86. Okay, so yeah, and this movie it's a John Carpenter film, so I think that was what originally kind of pulled me into it. But it was in this era of super vehicles films. So there was Blue Thunder, there was
Firefox.
Firefox.
Well, and then on TV there's Knight Rider and
Airwolf and the rat. Yeah, so it's like any kind of super powered vehicle. The only thing they didn't do was a golf cart eventually, as far as I can tell. But this movie, you watch the trailer, and the trailer gives you everything you need to know. It's like Tommy Lee Jones. It's like he's the guy you hire when the government can't get involved. And it's like, well, of course he is, and Linda Hamilton's involved. And the scenery chewing, if you could put Robert Vaughn, who I really like. I was a big fan of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. You put Robert Vaughn up against Anthony Zerbe in a scenery chewing competition, and it's going to be a close race. That's all I'll say about that.
You would be damned, Richard.
Yeah.
Damned. Don't you see that? Don't you see?
And of course, this movie, again, like the super vehicle genre, this film, of course, has Bubba Smith as the government agent that's kind of Tommy Lee Jones' handler. And it's just...
Well, he graduated from police academy, and he got the government job. And he never got... And the florist thing didn't work out.
He went to work for the feds, exactly. But well, he ended up with Dick Butkus in a police van driving around chasing the TV version of Blue Thunder.
That sounds like purgatory to me. Being stuck in a police van with Dick Butkus for all time.
Oh my God.
with his like Schaefer beer and chili dog farts.
Well,
Can you
think
imagine
about-
how awful that would be?
I know we're off Black Moon Rising, but if you talk about the TV version of Airwolf being really bad, and it's like totally completely different than the movie. It's like James Ferrantino replacing Roy Scheider and Dana Carvey replacing Daniel Stern, and you're like, what the hell is this? It's like,
And Warren Oates is dead and can't be in it, which makes it an even bigger bummer.
Oh my God.
and, you know, it's almost like they should have cast Gary Berghoff as in the Warren Oates role, and then it would have been perfect.
Warren
But,
Oates win. Let's do this. When
Yes.
bad films happen to bad people, this is kind of a new situation because we were like Todd and I were like, why is this a thing? I'm gonna skip down. Let's do this. I think I have the right situation.
Oh yeah, so this is a 1960s movie, I believe, right? And
Yeah.
let me see, what was the year? The year,
Rock
66, 68, yeah.
yeah, 68.
Patrick McGowan and Jim Brown.
John Sturges directing, Rock Hudson, Patrick McGowan, Ernest Borgnine, and Jim Brown. It's like this is checking all the boxes of this is a movie that the husband would want to see, and the wife would be like, no, I don't want to go see that. And so this would create arguments in that type of situation in 68. And this movie it looks great. It has, you know, based on a novel by Alistair MacLean. And it's like it should be everything, and it just kind of, I don't want to even say it just lays there.
It's kind of flat. No, there's a flatness to it. It's like because there's, you know, it's sad. Sturgis had a bad drinking problem at some point. I can't remember when, and it hurt his movies for a while. Like Hallelujah Trail has a lot wrong with it. Joe Kidd has a lot wrong with it. It was like when Frankenheimer got to drinking really badly. You see it affect their movies, you know. And I think they both cleaned up. You know, they both made really good movies after they had sobered up. But yeah, Ice Station Zebra is it's kind of flat. It's just sort of flat, you know. It's and it's sad thinking like, Jesus Christ, just a few years before this, Sturges had made movies like Bad Day at Black Rock, Never So Few, The Magnificent Seven, and The Great Escape, which are all magnificent films.
Yeah, and this by that measure should have just blown everybody's socks off.
Yeah,
and you're just kind of like, you know, not bad, but not great. And so, you know, you got the cream of the crop of action film stars there, you know, in the late 60s, and they give it their shot. They give it their best shot. And there's some unique, really cool elements, but that was the first one that came to mind, just because I happened, when Tracy asked me what I would pick. That's right, Jeff. Absolutely.
Yeah,
he's great. He's great in Silver Streak. Yeah.
What you know, that was on my queue at Amazon Prime when Tracy's like, "Hey, what are you gonna pick?" And I was like, "Oh, that's one."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a thing. Let me jump.
Tracy, you're doing wonderfully at the controls.
I'm
by the
trying
way,
because there's too many buttons, and Todd's so much better than I am at this. So Todd, missing you. I'm gonna jump to Shark, and I'm going to talk about a TV show. Look, I know it's not cool to like a network show because we're supposed to be hip and cool and young. And I have a good friend who works on the show, full disclosure. And a year ago, I was pitched the opening of this pilot, and I was like, you passed on 3 pitches I have that are amazing with actors, and a script of note, but okay. And I was very like, CBS. Full disclosure, 6 years of Madam Secretary that I pitched, sold, and produced. CBS, what's happening? So I wanted to be negative and cynical because I'm a Gen Xer. I am here to tell you people, Kathy Bates, who is a national treasure, has agreed to be the star of a 1-hour CBS show. I don't even want to say secretly. It was like, whatever. She's so much cooler than Andy McGriffith, but Kathy is on point. The writing is on point. The production value is on point. I watched the pilot to be an asshole so I could rip on it. Here's why I can't rip on it. It's brilliantly written. It's beautifully acted. I can't believe it's on network. If you just bear with me and you watch the pilot episode of Matlock, which is free, the last 7 minutes of this pilot are a fuck you, we have arrived, amazing thing. And then I watched the next episode and I'm like, oh, is this Good Wife level? It is Good Wife level. So I wanted to talk about it because I was like, oh my God, this show it's not Matlock. They disabuse you of whatever you think Matlock is. So like Matlock, the way that they creatively do a thing, this gorgeous writing, they use the word Matlock to get it greenlit, and then they do something that's very current. It surprised me, and I wanted to talk about that. I don't know if you guys have seen it because I think we're not the target demo. But
no, I don't. I hardly watch any series TV.
Okay.
I haven't, but I've noted it, and I want to check it out. I actually gonna have to bounce in about 6 minutes. So
yeah, we're good. All right, let's do it quick.
I'm not trying to. I don't want to pour.
No. It's the thing. The next. God, where is?
But yeah, it looks. I saw a brief clip of it. They were doing kind of like a featured thing that was on.
It's shockingly good.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Mark, talk to us about Black Moon.
I did.
Did you?
Yeah, just a few minutes ago. I did
that
too.
All right. So then we do. Sorry.
Yes, this is the boost, which is I have to also credit my wonderful girlfriend Isabel for recommending this movie at one point. We were looking for something to watch. She had seen it and loved it. And I don't remember seeing it many years ago. I remember seeing part of it. And anyway, it's we were on this discussion, Tracy, you and I, earlier of why aren't movies like this getting made anymore? And I don't remember specifically what movie we were talking about at the time. It wasn't Birdcage. But this movie, and it's like it's just such a touching story. It's about family and love and all this kind of stuff. And the setting, and there were people who were like, oh my gosh, it's about a gay couple, and it's like, yeah, but it's about a family before it's about a gay couple. And of course, Nathan Lane, it's just like, I'll watch anything the guy does.
Flawless.
And Hackman and Diane Wiest as the parents of, the brief setup is that Robin Williams and Nathan Lane raised Robin Williams' son from a previous relationship. And now that son is, in his mid to late 20s, and is getting married, and the bride to be's parents are arch conservative. He's an arch conservative congressman or senator, and it's like, this is just not going to work out well. It's going to be oil and water, and it just turns into one of these kind of funny capers where they're trying to put one over.
Well, before we go any further, I have to say, it's La Cage aux Folles. It's a remake of La Cage aux
Yeah.
Folles. And I mean,
Yeah.
we have now. I vastly prefer La Cage aux Folles. La Cage aux Folles is like makes me hurt from laughing. I mean, that movie, it's like it's so spectacularly funny.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time getting into the Birdcage, but I'm going to say this: Hank Azaria is hilarious in it. Azaria is, I mean,
Every time
that what is it? Oh my God! The one of my favorite line in the whole movie is where he goes, "You are afraid of my Guatemalans. You are afraid of my heat." And the thing with the shoes and where he's singing Lady Marmalade by the pool. I mean, I am a heretic to say this to a lot of people, but I don't find Robin Williams funny, and I don't find Nathan Lane really funny. I've never found either of them funny, but Azaria just kills. He kills in that movie. I mean, I won't lie, but like La Cage aux Folles, I vastly prefer. That movie is like, I mean, you want to watch me cry laughing. La Cage aux Folles. The part where he's trying to teach him how to eat toast virally like a man. It's so funny.
Well, I'll tell you that the Birdcage led me back to La Cage aux Folles, and very much the way that a terrible movie, which I would love to do on my favorite shitty movie, if we haven't already done it, is the Burt Reynolds, Kathleen Turner, Christopher Reeve switching channels from the mid-'80s, which is of course the front page, right? It's a remake of the front page, and
100%. We're gonna do that, Mark. I'm holding you to it.
Okay.
I know we have to wrap it up quickly. So The Awakening was my Charlton Heston touchdown. Be Bad, Be Best. I think it's Be Best. It's tragic. It's terrible. I love it. It's based on Bram Stoker, public IP. I love this movie. Mark, Justin, thoughts?
I would have to say
I'm gonna. Okay.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. So other than the fact that you rate it as a B best, I'm going to watch it. And also what we had mentioned before was for me, the artwork being reminiscent of one of the scenes, the mummy from the opening of Johnny Quest, the Hanna-Barbara cartoon.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, man, I want to see it. You know, and
I haven't seen it in so long, so no comment. I'm Switzerland on this one.
No, wow, Switzerland. Okay, it's all good. So what I'm gonna do for a boost, I want to do Lee. I was not in Los Angeles when this had 1 week, and Kate Winslet playing Lee Miller, who is a very important photographer, war correspondent, photographer in World War II. Her photography was, for a lot of us, before we were born, this is what the Nazis were doing. These are the boxcars. This is Dachau. This is the thing. And she was a woman who didn't make people feel good, because, but like photographed it. And I think I'm just going to say it right now, and I haven't seen what's going to come. It's the best film I've seen this year. Kate Winslet should win an Oscar until someone else shows up. I worked with Mimi Leader on a film that we don't have to talk about, 2009. She was trying to get Miller's story told. A lot of us who knew Miller thought it'll never get made. And then somebody smarter than us noticed that Kate Winslet looks a lot like Miller. And then they got a better script, at least to the 4 I've read, to Kate. Kate read it and was like, oh my God. Became a producer, got it made. It's gorgeous. I think it's the best film of the year that I've seen. And if you like cinema, not films, you should see Lee. And you can now watch it if you have a smart TV. Lee, don't just rent it for $9.99. Spend the $15.99 to own it. It's that good, and I wanted to lift it. That's my boost. I love it so much. I'm grateful for the quality of its female director, who was the DP. on Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
I gotta bounce in just a second.
Same.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We're done. Justin, thank you.
My pleasure.
And my God, Mark, always love.
Well, Tracy, thank you for asking me and Justin, of course. Anytime I get to listen to you talk about films, I continually tell people what an amazing experience it was to go see Fritz Lang's Metropolis with you and Tracy last year.
That was wonderful.
That was so much fun, and
That
it's
was
like
one of the best screenings ever.
I almost don't want to go to an LA Conservancy Last Remaining Seats event without Justin anymore. So
Right, Justin, come with us. Let's do the thing.
Will do.
Yeah.
All right,
But well, thank you for having me.
I'm going to close this out because we've gone way too long because hashtag Justin with his history. Justin Humphreys, thank you. Guys, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again because I can do this. Buy his freaking book and then do the Tash in Hollywood situation. Mark, amazing. Hindsight.
Yes.
What's your problem? Fucking download it. It's amazing. Do the thing. I'm so grateful for these gents to join me tonight. Todd will be back next week. We watched the page for the film we're going to talk about. I was just, Justin, Mark, I'm not saying this just because you're sexy and awesome. And see, Parker comes up. He's like, meh. But I'm just saying, it's like, thank you for being here. And
absolutely,
my pleasure.
I just want to
my
honor
pleasure as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Love you both.
Take good care. Night. Bye-bye.
Good night. Oh,
I think we're still live according to the
ending stream. Ending.
Let's see.
it's